Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, July 11th, 2022. Case file number 685, written by Miller's Left Shoe, The Inexplicable Mile-High Shortcut. This happened when I was flying back from New Zealand to Europe via Dubai, so the long flight was Auckland to Dubai in 2019. Haven't been able to make sense of it since. Usually, I'm an awful sleeper when on public transport. I'd been on long flights and bus rides before, and I never managed to shut an eyelid for longer than a few minutes. I'd wake up constantly in between because something was hurting, itching, I had to pee, etc. On my way to New Zealand, I slept for maybe 4 hours with a lot of waking up in between. It wasn't jet lag either, because this was the first half of the flight. There was nothing to be jet lagged about yet. So anyway, I was sitting next to this nice lady from Yorkshire who was considering moving to New Zealand for retirement. We shared life stories, spent quite a bit talking at the airport, where we'd met through coincidence, not knowing we'd sit next to each other. And when I decided to lean to the wall and listen to some music, the flight monitor told me there's 15 hours and 39 minutes to go. I put on my headphones, leaned back, closed my eyes, listened to around 3 songs, opened my eyes again, and suddenly the flight monitor was saying 5 hours and 30 minutes to go. It wasn't a monitor glitch, it really was only 5 more hours until we landed in Dubai. But I can't sleep for 10 hours. The lady next to me was in the same pose she'd been in before. I wasn't in a comfortable enough position to have slept. My phone was playing the same song it had been, at the same second mark. It hadn't even lost any battery percentage. I didn't have to go to the toilet despite drinking a lot before. My screen and app usage history, which I checked because I was confused as hell, hadn't gone up in minutes. There is no record of those 10 hours ever having passed. It was so weird. I'm a healthy young person and there's no way I'd just pass out for 10 hours straight. But we couldn't have just taken a shortcut from Auckland all the way to Dubai. There is no shortcut through the air. I'm still looking for explanations and have none. Nothing similar ever happened since. Case notes, file number 685. The Inexplicable Mile-High Shortcut. So glitches in the sky are just exciting to me. I always loved planes, even though I didn't fly too much in my life, only once or twice. But then you combine that with the time glitch, which are one of my favorites. We're off to the moon. I do wonder though, the woman next to you, did she perceive a time glitch too? Apparently in the comments in the thread, you mentioned that she didn't. She just said that she just woke up herself. So it makes you wonder, was the whole plane somehow induced into some kind of slumber? And how would that even be induced, and why? It doesn't seem likely. I mean, the flight attendants would be obviously suspicious if the whole plane suddenly falls asleep at the same time and can't be woken up. Or they themselves would fall asleep, and obviously the pilots didn't fall asleep because the plane is still there. I think there would be issues if pilots fell asleep for 10 hours straight. Just saying. And then everyone wakes up and they're all too nervous to talk about it? Maybe the woman next to you was just very nervous herself and lied, saying that she just woke up from a nap. But in reality for her, she just perceived that, yeah, time just skipped away. She lost 10 hours as well, but didn't want to come off as weird. So just brushed it away, like, okay, it's just me being crazy, and obviously no one else felt this too. The alternative is you really did fall asleep, but for you it just passed like that. That happened to me one other time in my life. I was going to lay down, rested my head, closed my eyes, and in just a blink, a flash, it was 9 hours later. It was the most unsettling of feelings. It felt like this isn't how reality works. For me, normally it takes at least 20 minutes to fall asleep, maybe 30, depending on how tired I am. To be able to fall asleep instantly and have it feel like it's only a second, that's a superpower. I want that. Or just a button you can press, just fall asleep. I kind of have insomnia in a way. Not really. I can fall asleep, I never want to go to bed. Although when I'm sleeping, then I never want to wake up, so I don't know what's going on. Now, this is not likely unless your phone was plugged in. Because if your phone wasn't plugged in, well, the battery would have drained, or at least severely depleted after 10 hours. You know, all of this is making me think of a movie. It's not exactly related to glitches, just a good movie. It was Jodie Foster and Flight Plan, I think it was called, where she's in the plane, she's flying home to bring her husband back for a funeral, something like that. And she has her daughter with her. Obviously the daughter is sad, she's sad, they're all distraught. She rests her head, her daughter is beside her on the plane, mid-flight, and then she wakes up and the daughter is missing. And no one seems to realize that she was there. No one remembers her being there. The flight attendants can't help her. She's not on the manifest of the plane, apparently. It's a really good movie. You should check it out if you like mysteries. Case file number 686, written by Moonlit Crystal, Garbage Bags and Ghosts. My husband passed away on April 5th. Ever since then, I've had some strange things happen. Let me first say that I was the only person in my apartment when these things happened, and I was not under the influence of anything. The first thing was a plastic baggie incident. When I cleaned out his nightstand, I found tons of empty plastic baggies. I have no clue why he felt the need to keep them. I laughed and threw them out because I was preparing to move and certainly didn't have any use for them myself. I should mention that our bedroom was directly across the hall from the front door, so I had no need to walk through the house with the baggies. The next morning, I found an empty baggie sitting on my coffee table in the living room. I was sure I had not taken it in there. It couldn't have been one of my own baggies because it was a different size and brand than the ones I use. The second thing was a trash bag incident. I had a huge roll of black trash bags that I was using to pack most of my clothes and also used to bag up some stuff for Goodwill. One day, I went to grab a trash bag and the whole roll was just gone. I literally turned the apartment upside down because I moved, and I never found them anywhere. I know damn well I didn't throw them out. I needed them to pack up and move. The third thing was a joint incident. My husband enjoyed smoking a particular substance from time to time, and he had a small joint left over when he passed. I don't smoke it, so I had no reason to bother with it. One day I looked at the spot where I was keeping it, and it was gone. I'd love to think it was my husband giving me signs that he was okay, and that he's still with me. Creepy file number 32, written by Miss Jessie, Crying Bait. I truly feel like I'm going insane. This has been occurring for months now, and what began as slight anxiety is now intense paranoia. Every night I hear my cat outside my window crying. Not meowing, crying. Cat owners will understand what I mean. The first night, I walked outside without hesitation and called my cat. When that didn't work, I worried his legs or paws may be hurt, which would explain the crying. So I went and searched for him with my phone flashlight. That detail is important because, as you probably know, phone flashlights are not very bright. So when I saw something moving in the bushes, it was impossible to tell if it was my cat or not. What I do know is that when I gave up and chalked up its behavior up to being a brat, because let's be real, what cat comes when they're called? And it's no stretch for him to whine for no reason. So I walked back inside my house to find my cat, curled up and sleeping on my couch. There's no way he somehow got past me walking through the door without my knowledge. But still, I brushed it off because I suppose anything is possible. It happened again about a week later. And by then, I had forgotten about the first weird experience. Only when I looked to the foot of my bed and remembered my cat had been with me the entire time, it all came rushing back. I'm the girl who makes fun of horror movie characters for being stupid, so when I sauntered outside in morbid curiosity, let me honestly tell you I have never retrospectively hated myself more. I went to my window and the crying was so clear it had to be coming from within a few feet, but I didn't see anything. Which was strange because I definitely saw something the first night. It was around this time that the creepiness of it all hit me, and I all but ran back inside. I swore then that my cat lost his nighttime privileges and would be indoors by sundown, and I wouldn't investigate this anymore, naively thinking it would go away. It has just gotten worse. That was months ago, and the crying occurs almost nightly now. Barring a couple nights of feline rebellion, I've been vigilant about keeping him indoors at night, so I know for a fact that whatever I'm hearing is not my cat. It just sounds so realistic. Before you comment saying it was another cat, don't bother. I know what my cat sounds like. I'm a proud cat mom, and I can tell him apart from the neighborhood strays. I'm familiar with being cautious of baby cries outside your door at night because predators have been known to record them and bait women, essentially weaponizing their maternal instinct. But who does that with a cat? For that to work, not only would they have to know I have a cat, but also somehow gain access to a recording of his crying and play it back for me every night outside my window. Hello, nightmare. Has anyone experienced something similar? How did you make it stop? Is this goal just to rob me of sleep and peace of mind, or is it finally time for me to suck up my pride and see somebody because I'm officially insane? Case file number 687, written by Ulrich Loves Andrea, a glitch of the Aztek. Okay, so let me preface this by saying that since about 1999 to 2000, I've been getting accused of being places, having conversations I don't remember, etc. This other me always drives the same car that I have. I think the two of us have been swapping back and forth for 2 decades. Until this past autumn, it hadn't happened for several years. Then in October, I was getting phone calls or people telling me later they saw me somewhere and that they were calling me, but I ignored them. On to the main reason I came to post this. In November, I was in a horrible car accident. My best friend lives about a mile from me. We were leaving my house and heading to hers. She left about 2 minutes before me, her 12-year-old daughter with her. About a minute after I left, she called to tell me that she was stopping at the gas station and that I needed to get over into the right lane because there's a really bad accident blocking the left lane. She says it's weird because one of the vehicles in the accident looked exactly like mine. We hung up right before I went through an intersection about a quarter of a mile from the gas station and the intersection where the accident was. I set the phone next to me, and the next thing I know, I can only describe what is my soul or life force being forcefully sucked back into my body. My left leg is pinned under the dashboard and the windshield is on top of me. I was somehow instantly transported 6 blocks to an accident that happened before I was even on that street. My best friend and her daughter says there's no way this could have happened because they passed the accident while on the phone with me. The people who stopped to help all said they didn't know what happened and didn't see anything special. The street was full of cars. It was rush hour on a main street. When I say that my van was totaled, I mean that no one knows how I survived. I had to be cut out of it with the jaws of life. Once I was out of the hospital, I started noticing little things being just off. I just can't put my finger on what it is that's not right. I feel like I'm in a different reality, be it ever so slightly different. I think maybe my alternate me died and I lived. I don't know. But I can't figure out how the accident happened or how I went on from one intersection to another in a split second. How my best friend and her 12-year-old daughter saw it while they were on the phone with me telling me about it. And then it happened to me. This whole situation is driving me nuts, and maybe somewhere I have kids that are mourning their mother. Right before the accident was when several people said they saw me, and since the accident, no one has seen her, and I don't know if anyone ever will again. This is all just blowing my mind, and whenever I try to tell someone about it, they look at me like I need a padded room and 24/7 observation. I'd probably think that too if I didn't have independent witnesses. I absolutely can't believe I forgot this part. So, last year, I filed my taxes and got my refund, but I needed to file an amendment and was told I'd get it by early August. August comes and goes and nothing happens. No one can tell me jack. I forget about it. This whole time, the van that was wrecked, I had a massive hole in the radiator, among other major things that were not worth fixing. The amendment was gonna get me a new car. Well, an accident happens. I can't leave my house for 3 months due to injury and panic attacks at the suggestion. February rolls around, and in the middle of the night, I see an envelope on the floor next to my bed. I open it, and it's the damn amendment check finally. No one knows where it came from, and everyone swears it was never in the mailbox. Anyways, a few weeks prior to this, my best friend, same one from above, who works at a mechanic shop, casually mentioned she bought a 2001 Pontiac Aztek at a ridiculous price to resell there. My jaw drops. That vehicle is number 3 on my all-time list. I've literally wanted one since 2001. It has one owner, almost in brand new condition. I was fretting for 3 weeks how to get the money to buy it because they weren't going to hold it. Boom comes the check. At the exact same time, I can now leave my house. At the exact same time, that car shows up. If I had gotten it back in August, I probably would have fixed the van's problems because it would have been easier and cheaper. So all that crap happens with the accident, and then this was my silver lining. A vehicle that was only manufactured for 5 years and barely sold any and was touted as the car that killed the Pontiac. Like, that was what made this whole thing even weirder. Plus I paid half what it was worth because of the hookup from my best friend. Basically paid for the repair to it that the owner didn't want to pay. These cars are going to be buried with me, y'all. So that's the weird story more than a coincidence. Rest of ending to the story. In all, it's perfectly timed madness. And honestly, if it meant I ended up with the Aztek, I'd do the whole thing over. Broken body and never having answers to all of it. I honestly posted this because I wanted to know if anyone else had a similar experience, and maybe not to feel so alone. Sincerely, thank you. Bonus file, written by Sis Goldhour. When even your money is haunted. So, I've had a few paranormal experiences in my life thus far. Some frightening stuff, but nothing that was actually dangerous in retrospect. I recently started a security job at a bank. I work overnight and monitor the entirety of the building's interior, as well as patrols of the exterior. The building is 6 stories, with only the bottom one actually being the functional bank. The upper floors are mainly untouched and outdated offices, with a few being rented by businesses. No one whatsoever is in the building at night, and surveillance doesn't cover the upper floors because they're so well separated from the bank. While doing my rounds of the upper levels and checking every unlocked room, for example bathrooms, closets, mechanical rooms, storage spaces, stairwells, the whole 9 yards, I didn't find anything as usual. But while I was on the 4th floor, I heard someone call my name and heard a door close. Of course, I was freaked out, but I pushed through the fear and tried to stay rational. I did a second sweep of the floor, and again, nothing. Then I got really scared. I got to the stairwell on the floor and opened the door to listen. Stairwells echo really badly, so we're taught to be silent and listen for intruders. While I'm standing there, with my head peeked through the door, I don't hear anything. Until I do. 2 men's voices come from the stairwell, I'm assuming. I announced myself and started up, but found nothing and didn't hear any doors open or close, which I should have. Then I'm at the last flight up to the roof and I heard loud footsteps running up the stairs. I'm absolutely terrified at this point and prepare myself for physical altercation. Weapon at the ready, I wait for the perp to come to me because I'm on high ground. The steps sound close enough that I should be able to see the person causing them. But I don't. Then I hear labored breathing with the steps and still see nothing. Next thing I know, I'm physically pushed back. I didn't fall very far, more like collapsed into the steps behind me. The sounds continue to the roof door, and to my shock it opens with a bang, and then shuts. I actually saw it open and shut. It's normally locked, so I go to secure it and call the cops, but when I get to it, it's locked again. I have absolutely no explanation for this. I've never been pushed or physically touched by an entity, and I'm shaking badly. On top of this, the next night I'm sitting in the lobby with elevators behind me. Again, no one in the building. And I hear the outdated elevator go up some floors, stop, and shift with weight entering it, then come back down. I'm absolutely terrified as it touches down and the doors open. No one in sight. But when I got up to look closer, something stepped towards me, pushed me over again, then ran up the stairwell adjacent to the elevator. I'm terrified of this building. I'm the first female guard they've hired, newer company. The men I've spoken to don't experience anything. It pays too good to quit, but I'm at a loss of what to do. Case notes. Bonus file. When even your money is haunted. So, reading this story, I actually get a lot of vibes of, not paranormal, but of someone scouting out the bank. Now, of course, you ask, well, how could they be doing that? If it's a real person, do they have advanced cloaking technology? Which, to my knowledge, isn't actually something anyone can just buy. If anyone had that kind of technology, it would be government related. But what would they be doing scouting out some random bank? Why would they care? Maybe there's some important documents or technology that's hidden away in one of the safety deposit boxes. Just speculating. I really don't know why someone would scout out some random bank if they had technology that advanced. It is theoretically possible though. By using cameras and computers embedded in a suit, you could project the image from behind to the front, and then you'd have a sort of cloaking technology. But it wouldn't work exactly perfectly. At certain angles, the image wouldn't be able to match the perception of the person looking at it, which is a serious problem. So you would probably be able to perceive that it wasn't a ghost, it would be a human, just depending on the angles. The few things that lead to this point, though, the first is that you don't report any sensations of being cold or lights flickering. I don't know if anything like this exists. It is a cool idea. I hope it does. Depending on who's using it, of course. But yeah, you only reported sounds, weird sounds, and then no one's there. And voices too. So that could be a real person. The other thing is that to get to the door they had to go through you. They pushed you out of the way for some reason. If it was a ghost, why would they care? Why would they just randomly push someone and then just disappear through a door? To open and close it too, why not just phase through the door? Just to mess with you? I guess it's possible. Maybe the bank is haunted by a poltergeist and who's just having fun with you. But I don't know. That doesn't quite fit in my mind. Not inconceivable, but I think there's something a bit more mundane, but technologically awesome. Something like that. Case file number 688, written by Nick, crashing into another universe. This story is very bizarre, and I'm not going to give you the backstory of how I ended up in the situation I was in, because it was a very traumatic experience. Anyways, I ended up jumping out of a vehicle and running as fast as I could to get away from someone. I ran to the first car I saw, and it had the keys in it. Let me just say, I don't steal other people's cars other than for the reason of the ordeal I was going through. This was an emergency. I drove erratically to hopefully get someone to call the police so I could get pulled over and receive help because the person I was running from was directly behind me. Once the police finally got behind me, I went to pull over, but something happened with the steering wheel and I went off into a ditch that was extremely deep, crashing the car. All I remember was being sat on by some police officer and being so scared for my life that I couldn't speak. I was in shock. They didn't ask what I was doing or even why I stole the car to begin with, so I stayed quiet and I went to jail. After I got bonded, I went home and started noticing everything was off. Nothing was the same anymore. My mother and brother, who I was having issues with, are different now. They treat me so well. For example, my brother would cuss me out and talk down to me all the time. He never told me he loved me. All of a sudden I would say, "I love you, brother." And he would reply, "I love you too, sister, good night." Or, "I love you, be safe." For example, I asked him if I could borrow $20. He said, "For what?" I said, "Because I really like to read and I'm out of coins." He said, "Alright, but I need it back." I was in shock because he used to be so greedy and I'm used to him saying something nasty like, "Go sell yourself if you want it that bad." Not anymore. He doesn't do that anymore. My mother is being the mother she never was before. It's like I have a different, more loving brother and mother. Things also changed with my dad. We aren't close anymore. He was my everything, but not anymore. I started noticing things were different in movies I watched. So for months and months, I kept putting in keywords of what I was experiencing, and the Mandela effect came up. I jumped with joy when I saw that millions of people are going through what I'm going through, because I almost committed myself into a psychiatric ward over this. I think I died the day I crashed my car and shifted into this reality. Let me say that I was not on drugs, but had experienced a traumatic experience with someone who wouldn't let me leave his side, and that's why I jumped out of the first vehicle and stole the car to begin with. One more thing, if your life is in danger, do whatever it takes to survive your attacker, even if it means stealing a car. I did my year in county jail, and I'd do it again if I had to, because at least I survived. Case notes for file 688, crashing into another universe. So I would agree that it's very probable that you did actually die in the crash, going at high speed into a ditch. Maybe the airbags didn't deploy for some reason, or maybe just the shock of it created a hemorrhage in your brain. And those are just two ways that I'm thinking off the top of my head. Said before, but the human body is very fragile. There's like 61 million people that die every single year worldwide. That's a staggering number. You'd think it'd be a lot less than that, but that's a lot of people. Of course, tons of people being born, so the net is still positive, but that's so many people dying. It's truly wild. Although there is a possible mundane explanation, in that maybe just being in that crash and then having a traumatic event, but also going to prison, or jail. Maybe it changed the mindset of your brother and mother. Maybe it made them more welcoming of you and cherishing the moments they have, and maybe trying to just be nicer to you, to give you a better life experience. Not sure why your dad would pull away in this case, and it wouldn't explain why you don't remember movie details the way they are now. I was rewatching Total Recall recently, the original. The remake is okay, but it doesn't compare to the original. There's a vibe there that cannot be replicated. A certain je ne sais quoi, the magic. It's a reflection on how memory can be falsified and how fickle it can be. Obviously, we don't have machines that can alter it directly, not in that way, not that we know of anyways. There's also an episode of Stargate SG-1 where this happens to Colonel Mitchell, in that he's on an alien world and they have this device where they can implant or remove memories from, and very specific ones too. Like they craft a scene like you would a movie and then implant it in. It could be a fake memory, could be real memories too. It's an appealing technology if you could train people to be fighter pilots or doctors or whatever in a few hours instead of years. That's a huge benefit, obviously. Just transport their memories, not just knowledge, but their very experience of these people. That's tremendously powerful. But the same applies if it's a false memory that's implanted in a way that is shocking and traumatic, like killing someone, which is what happened to Colonel Mitchell. But the entire time, even knowing it wasn't a real memory, it's hard not to believe it. It's hard to doubt your own mind. To lose faith in your own mind, that'd be the easiest way to go crazy. But in your case, I don't think that's what happened. I do think the most probable answer is you died and quantum immortality, whoop, zapped you away, and now you're in a different, slightly altered universe. But it's always good to consider mundane possibilities, because not everything is going to be an actual glitch. Hard to say sometimes, but this one's pretty clear-cut. And I'm happy for you that you reconnected with your brother and mother. Family's important. I hope you can remedy whatever it is that's off with your dad now. Reconnect there too. Bring the whole family back together. That would be great. Bonus file, written by October Mindset. An afterlife spent in the kitchen. I was working a part-time job at a church at the time, and it was at the end of the day, so I was cleaning up and getting ready to lock up for the day. For context, this church is very old. There are graves on the property from the 1860s, and the place has burned down twice. I go to the church's kitchen to grab my lunch bag from the fridge, and when I walk through the door, in the corner of my eye, I see a woman at the counter to my right. I thought it was my boss, but the fridge was straight ahead, so I walked forward and grabbed my stuff. I turned around and there was no one there now. I was alone in the kitchen, and the door did not open, but there was someone there. I made a conscious effort not to look because I'm kinda socially awkward. I thought about it and realized that the woman was wearing a white dress with a pink floral pattern on it. How on earth could that be my boss, who only wears jeans and sweaters? Freaked out, I went outside and locked up the church and told my friend about it, who's been going to the church for a long time. He told me that people joke about it being haunted, but there's no way you saw a ghost in broad daylight like that. It's a light playing tricks on your eyes. After my job was done, I forgot about the interaction until I got a text from my friend. He said, "Bro, was that woman you saw working at the counter wearing a white dress with a pink floral pattern?" I never described the ghost to him before, so we both saw the same woman in the kitchen, cooking. Our theory is that back in the day, the woman would do all the work in the kitchen for church services. She must have been buried in the church grounds and she was stuck there working in the kitchen for decades or even a century. Creepy file number 33, written by an old truth teller. By the way, this isn't my laptop. I was on a plane once and noticed that although people were still boarding, there were a large number of seats around me unoccupied. The last people on, though, were all together and consisted of one large family traveling together. There were 4 adults and about 10 children, ranging from toddler age to high school and young adult. They had the usual look of a large group traveling with children, some of whom were shy and withdrawn, others who were running around, and the adults looking frazzled, trying to keep everyone and everything together. When they'd all been seated, there seemed to be some issue with the seating, as one member of their party was supposed to sit several rows back. The flight attendant apologized and said that it happens, that sometimes their computer will shuffle sequential seating, etc., but assured them that there was seating available for everyone. The family sat down, -1, and started with the usual, "That's a shame, wish they could sit up here," talk. Since it seemed that their party was surrounding me, I stopped the flight attendant and asked her if I could switch seats with another passenger. This caught the attention of the large group, perhaps anticipating a complaint, but the flight attendant told me no, they don't usually do that, and that everyone has been seated already, but asked if there was a problem with where I was sitting. I explained to her that I was traveling solo and did not care where I sat, and asked if I could give my seat to the member of the family who was absent, as my seat would have been put in the midst of the group anyways. The family overheard and was thanking me as I retrieved my bag overhead and followed the flight attendant to the family member's seat. She explained what was happening, and I noticed that the family member, a young girl maybe 12 years old, seemed in a hurry to get back to her family and thanked me 4 times. She practically ran up the aisle, and before I could sit down, the man who'd been sitting next to her was literally staring with his mouth open and asked, "What's the problem?" No, that girl was sitting here first. Red flag number 1. And the flight attendant explained to him what was happening, and he immediately looked at me and said, "No, I don't want to sit next to him. Where's that girl going?" She explained to him that there was no issue and she couldn't do anything else now. I think she was getting the same vibe as me. Now, I want to assure everyone that I'm not in the habit of judging people by their appearance, but this guy was the definition of red flags. He was overweight and paunchy. That overweight with no muscle tone look that some people have. Half bald with a few strands combed over, thick glasses and no chin. He was a mouth breather and kept his mouth open constantly, drooling on himself and then sucking it back in between heavy breathing. If there was a textbook example of a creep, it would be him. As I was putting my bag overhead, he started talking to himself under his breath about how this was BS, just my luck. Wasn't bothering anybody, and why did they move that girl? I wanted to say something to him but didn't. It wasn't long before my neighbor got a call and was talking about an upcoming court appearance, and I overheard, "No victim's testimony," and "rarely show up," and "people wouldn't ask me to babysit if I was like that." The only time I said anything to him was when he started blatantly watching porn on his laptop with earphones in, grunting, sweating, wheezing, and kept repeating, "little bitch," when a part was on that he evidently liked. Then took a blanket and covered his lap, with hands fidgeting underneath. As soon as I saw that he intended on keeping them there, I pretended to reach for the call button. Then he jerked his hands out and started muttering under his breath about me minding my own business. At some point, I got up to use the restroom, and when I returned, he was on his phone again, and I caught something about the butt on her. No. Switched seats on me. Got away, and he shut up as he saw me approaching. The creep went on to sleep eventually, and fortunately stayed asleep for the rest of the flight. When we were all deboarding, a woman I presume was the mother was standing with the girl and said, "Thank you again." I shuddered to think how he acted in the short time she was next to him, or what he would have done had she remained there. Shocking absolutely no one, including himself, he was met at the gate by security and police. As he was being led away, he said, "This isn't my laptop, by the way." Case file number 689, written by Usarina16. A glitch of crumpled metal. I was 17, I'm 34 now, dating a boy named Alex from high school, and he asked me if I wanted to cheer him on at a Magic the Gathering tournament. It was supposed to run from 8 to midnight, and my dad told me to be home by 12:30. The tournament ran too late. It was 2 a.m. before it ended. I finally turned on my phone and was immediately called by my irate father to get home now and that I was grounded. My boyfriend was pissed despite winning his tournament at being rushed. He drove erratically down the street and was running stop signs and even a red light. I saw headlights as we ran through. I heard the screech of the tires and even the crumple of the metal. I was meant to die in that crash. I braced myself hard and closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, we were through the intersection and not a scratch on the car. I got home, threw Alex under the bus, and thanked my dad for his anger as it unleashed careless behavior from my then boyfriend. I broke up with him shortly after, as he never admitted his behavior was reckless. Case file number 690, written by Weird News 3634. They seemed normal, but they weren't human. So I'm not exactly a paranormal believer per se, but I've had a couple of experiences while hunting or hiking that I just can't explain rationally. The most unnerving one happened probably 7 or 8 years ago. Normally, I'd hunt on some property that my family owns. I don't even remember the reason anymore that I decided to hunt on public land this time. Probably just a change of scenery. I remember that it was evening in fall, but it was a fairly uncharacteristically warm day. I got to the access road and pulled off to the spot where everyone pulls off to park and walk in, and noticed there were a couple of old boys already there. Nothing too weird about them, except there is no truck or vehicle for them to have pulled in on. They also didn't have guns with them, but they were dressed in hunter orange. But at the time, I just figured that they were backpackers or campers. There's not too far from this spot than a campground, and it's not uncommon for folks to spend weekends away from their family for some peace and quiet for their hunting trip. Anyways, they seemed friendly enough, and there was absolutely nothing said to make them seem any different than hundreds of other fellows I've met while hunting. They were just a couple of hillbillies from the sounds of it. We shot the crap for a couple of minutes. They took off, and I sat on my phone for a bit, trying to give them a head start, because I was afraid they'd drive off the squirrels. Except I clearly didn't wait long enough. Probably like 10 minutes up the trail, it curved to the left, but I heard noises coming directly from ahead. It sounded bigger than a squirrel, but I also like seeing any sort of animal, and it didn't sound too far off the main path. When I crept off the path, the ground started to drop, so I was able to look down and see my new pals, but not acting right at all. This is going to be hard to explain without a visual. But they weren't just moving like normal people. Their movements were jerky, and it's almost like they'd forgotten that things like knees and other joints were able to bend. They were more rigid than I can describe. I didn't stick around long, because frankly it was freaking terrifying. I backed away slowly and quietly to the trail, and then hauled my butt back to my car. I've spoken with several of the more open-minded outdoorsmen in the area, and none of them have ever heard of anything like that. Drugs were the most common theory that I've heard, and I know that's a logical assumption, but man, I've seen folks on a lot of different drugs and those movements just look too scarily unnatural. I've done some Googling in the years since for similar incidents in my area, but I've yet to find anything that sounds like this. How could human beings be that rigid? It's impossible. Case notes, file number 690. They weren't human. Finally, it's been a while since I had a case where I can really say, this is aliens, definitely. And if you give it a few moments of thought, it's not inconceivable that aliens would have the technology to basically construct meat suits, for lack of a better word, of human beings and inhabit them, either by transferring their consciousness into the body, or just building a body that mimics it and they control it from afar. So it's sort of like a Terminator robot thing. And it's not inconceivable because any aliens capable of reaching us, either from another solar system or from another higher dimension, would be so far beyond us in technology, it's almost incomprehensible. It'd be like trying to imagine a color that doesn't exist. Oh, good luck with that. And why would they want to do that? Well, to study us. I'm reminded of a movie, Star Trek Insurrection, where they're trying to examine a lower species. They don't have warp capability, but they appear to be immortal. Interesting. And they just want to learn more about them, so they camouflage themselves into like a bunker in the side of a rock, and they're just observing this little town to see how they behave, their culture, how they think, how they talk, their language, and all that. In this case though, well, why would aliens limit themselves to one small geographic location when they could just build a body, inhabit it or remotely control it, and then live with us and really get the feel of who we are and how we live? Presumably if they're intelligent and not out to kill us, well, that's the whole purpose of studying. Unless you're trying to conquer, well, you just want to know who they are. It's what I would do if I had the technology, and we could actually explore other worlds and we found real life there, but wasn't quite advanced enough to interact with us on the same level. You still want to get to know them, even though you can't make your presence known, or at least not directly. But I do wonder, what were they doing alone in the forest? If they are indeed aliens, they obviously aren't hunting. Maybe they're just studying the wildlife, the vegetation. Maybe it's not just humans they're interested in. Maybe the planet, Earth, is more interesting and rare than we think. And maybe they're sort of caretakers for this planet and living things on it. I like that idea. It gives a new meaning to Guardian Angel. Maybe we need to rename it to Guardian Alien. Creepy file number 34. Written by Medium Ticket 9574. A Midday Abduction. I had been staying at a motel while on a business trip in Mobile, Alabama. One day, I decided to walk to Zaxby's for lunch. It was only a short distance across the street from the motel, near a pretty busy intersection, so a young woman felt pretty secure doing that in the middle of the day. As I was just exiting the hotel's parking lot, about to begin to cross the street, not in a crosswalk, I noticed an older-style rust-orange-colored, perhaps Chevy Chevelle or maybe Oldsmobile Cutlass, sorry, I don't really know old cars, pulled into the empty parking lot across the street exactly where I would have been heading if I stayed on my current trajectory. I remember thinking it was a weird place to park your car because he had parked the vehicle only in the entrance of this empty parking lot, not in a parking spot. Then I noticed a tall, heavier-set man step out of the driver's seat and walk to the trunk, open the trunk, stand to the side of the open trunk, and just look at me as I'm getting closer and closing the distance between us. Every alarm bell in my body is going off in my head as a really bizarre thing he is doing. But at this point, I'm exactly halfway across the street in the middle of the road and realize I'm going to have to be the annoying one who very obviously changes her course to avoid walking any closer to this man. I decided I'd take the chance of looking like that person and immediately U-turn my body back to the motel side of the street. During this time of changing my direction, this man gets back into his car and pulls across the street directly in front of me and into the entrance of the motel parking lot that I'm about to pass and looks straight at me with his window about 2 inches down. After seeing the way he's looking at me, I very quickly change directions yet again and quickly walk back across the street and make a beeline for Zaxby's. Anyone watching would have witnessed me zigzagging across the street about 3 times if memory serves me. Anyway, I didn't get kidnapped, but I think that was his intention, and that was creepy as hell.